Hello everybody, it's your favorite West Virginia Space here, and if you follow the RPG world, you've probably noticed the massive boycott going against 5e at the moment. Well, it's been going on for a while, but I'm just kind of getting tired of sicking it. I swear, you look up anything about RPGs, or you just mildly follow RPGs on YouTube, it's all I see. It's like, better RPGs than 5e. Why you should stop playing 5e. Why 5e sucks. It's just over and over again. And listen, I'm not here to say that 5e is the best RPG that's ever existed. I mean, I think it's very, very high up there. It's my favorite version of D&D. But listen here, I'm not here to demand people that they must like 5e more than everything else. But some of the hate against it is just getting ridiculous. I mean, it's truly reaching absurd levels. It's just people hating because they want to hate at this point, because it's popular and hip to hate it. Anyway, and I'm just going to break into some of the reasons why people hate it and why I don't think they hold very good water. The first thing, and probably what started the hate train recently, is how Wizards of the Coast has been acting. It didn't help, firstly, when they announced 1E, which they call just a revised edition of 5E, but it really looks like it's just its own thing at this point. Basically, it should have been called 6E rather than 5E, but because we're pretentious now, we have to pretend that the old things didn't exist and have to restart from number 1 for some reason. Mortal Kombat, I'm looking at you. But ultimately, and that's a different matter, and that's the thing, is a lot of hate for the new 1E has now been getting redirected at 5E for no particular reason, and I don't get it. I really don't. But also is that Wizard of the Coast, even after that, has been acting like a complete lunatic. I won't go into that because that could take an entire discussion on its own, and I really don't want to be the 15th person to go into that. But ultimately, yes, Wizard of the Coast is acting like a moron. But on the other hand, none of that's 5E's fault. 5e didn't do this, it's just a rule system. Don't hate the game just because the people who made it are being absurd. That's just stupid, and it's not a good argument of why a game sucks. It's just you saying, I don't like the person who made this, so therefore what they made is bad, without providing a good argument. Another complaint I've been hearing that at least has a bit more ground is they claim that 5e is unbalanced. That it's so unbalanced, it's just broken, and it needs to be, we need a new RPG that's less broken. And while I will concede that some of the more recent releases have been a bit wonky as far as power creep goes, I'm looking at you, Spelljammer, but ultimately, I don't think it's that bad, especially with the core book and the earlier releases. It's not that bad, people. Yes, there are some things that are objectively a bit wonky, but I don't think it's gone to the point of completely breaking the game. And like a point I'm going to make, you could just not allow the newer stuff in and just play with the stuff that's more quote-unquote balanced. And also, 3.5 has the exact same problem, potentially even worse. The only thing that saves 3.5 from being broken like 5e can be is that it's so much more broken, it wraps around to being balanced again. Which I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. It's just kind of a fact. That's just the point, though. The next point is actually two, but I'm going to merge into one, is people who either say, oh, 5e is too easy, it's a dumb baby game, not for hardcore gamers like me, or people say, oh, 5e is too hard, I can't memorize anything, I need a simpler game. Now listen, okay, if you like or need your RPGs to be more complex or easier, fine, whatever. It's a matter of opinion in your group, and you're entitled to, obviously whatever you want. But I think since I see so many people complain that 5e has the exact opposite problem of either being too complex or too simple, it kind of makes me feel that maybe base, or at least core 5e, is actually pretty close to dead center, which I consider to be pretty good. And I think the balancing of the complexity of 5e is quite simple. It's very easy to learn. It doesn't take long to explain at all, especially if you even have a vague passive familiarity how an RPG works. But it's very easy to get someone into RPGs through 5e. And it has complexity in bits. You have tons of character options that you don't need to memorize every bit of character creation. You just need to memorize whatever class and race you're playing. And honestly, that's quite fun, and it's not complex at all, but gives you tons of room for expression. So honestly, I don't really see the problem here. I think its complexity and simplicity level is pretty good, honestly. Now, this next point sounds on the surface like it should be part of the last one, but it's actually going to be a different thing, and I'll explain why in a second, is people who are saying that 5e is too easy. What I mean by that is not that it's simple to understand or something. No, is that, the characters are too powerful, the monsters aren't weak enough, the game isn't lethal enough, and, that kind of thing. If you're in the RPG world, you probably understand this a bit better than I'm explaining it. But the thing is, they're kind of right on this complaint. If we're talking about Adventures League, or you use a very strict version of the CR monster system, or you're using a pre-made adventure, yeah, generally speaking, 5e is a bit on the easy side. Like, not always in the best way. However, I want to offer a counterpoint to this in a slight manner. First, to the leveling thing. Though it can feel a bit fast, the players level up extremely fast and ascend to high levels, if you look at the tier system of how it's designed in 5e, it kind of lays out how powerful roughly you should think your characters are. And ultimately, I just say if you want to play low-level games, just don't have XP raise as fast. You know what I mean? Increase how much XP you need or how little XP monsters give. On the actual lethality side, that's a bit more complicated. Now, granted, 5e monsters can sometimes be a bit on the easy side compared to older editions, but some older editions of D&D and RPGs were just unfair. Like, let's be honest here, level drain is just kind of a jerk. There is a reason a lot of OGL, classic old school RPGs, do not bring over level draining for enemies, because nobody like that, really. But, like... And so I don't even, I'm sorry, I'm getting confused here. What I really mean here is that, since you are the GM in this scenario, you can buff the lethality, not without changing a rule, just by making the monsters tougher, or putting more of them, or remembering that traps exist in dungeons, and stuff like that. It's, like, granted, it takes a little bit of work on the GM, but ultimately, if you are incapable as a GM of designing encounters or a story that can challenge your players when they're at low levels, like you say, I don't think that's a flaw in 5e, because there are plenty of powerful monsters in the game for that level, or you can easily create or buff your own monsters. Then I don't think it's a flaw in the game, I think it's a flaw in your GMing. No offense. The last point I'm going to make today is probably going to be the most controversial one, is the whole 5e doesn't have the right style or theme, or there's so many options, like there's just too many, it ruins any game. And it's hard to really narrow that down correctly, but if you know, you know. And there is some truth to that. 5e has a lot of content, not even counting homebrew or other supplements. The official, content they have released is staggering, and there is just so much to go on at this point. It can be hard to have a cohesive world with a therm setting, and I kind of get that. But let me just make an argument for you here, okay, for just a second here. One, unless you're playing Adventures League, but if you're not doing that, there's no law saying you have to allow every bit of content 5e has ever produced. As the GM and a group of players, you can reasonably come to some conclusions to restrict or ban certain things. You know, if you think, tortoise people are ridiculous in your setting, you don't want players playing them, then just be honest for a second. Don't require that the game entirely change itself. Just have a tiny bit of, self-independence and just do stuff like that. And as far as theming goes, 5e is somewhat geared to, heroic fantasy, but there's so much you can do with 5e. And quite frankly, it's less about rules and more about how you run a game. There is absolutely no rule in 5e that says you can't play classic sword and sorcery like Conan, or dark fantasy like Warhammer Fantasy, or Lord of the Rings style action, or the highest high fantasy ever. There's a whole lot you can do with 5e. It just requires a good GM and a willingness on the players to just do what you want. And I think that's the most important thing. A lot of people today, they need the game to be exactly what they want. It needs to be exactly out of the box, exactly what they want. And I think that it kind of forgets part of the fun of RPGs, the creativity. Yes, there is a real sword and sorcery setting for 5e. For example, they're probably never going to adapt Dark Sun, really. Well, by some a few monsters. But here's the thing, for example, you could still run a Dark Sun D&D game in 5e. You just, do it like that. And here's the thing, is that could be fun. You just have to embrace the creativity that made D&D so great. Never forget that D&D started out as a war game that Gary Gygax and his friends basically chopped up into the heroic RPG we have today, or at least its first edition. And never forget that. The creativity that made this hobby so great, don't forget it just because you want the cover of your book to look exactly what you want. And, just don't forget that. And just remember, just try to have fun with all this. The game is meant to be fun. We're supposed to come together as a group of friends to have fun with it. So just be a little creative, and I think 5e will honestly be quite happy with you. You'll be quite happy with it, in my opinion. It's a very good system, one of the best in my opinion. But ultimately, that's just my opinions. Do you agree with my points I made, or do you think I missed something? Either way, comment down below. Helps the algorithm. Like, comment, subscribe, and all that jazz. And I'll see you all next time. Yeah. Hey, why don't you hit that sub button? You're gonna become a subscribble. Get to see my content quicker. Wouldn't that be nice? I bet so.